Captured SS men expected death, but for over 200,000 of them, the nightmare was just beginning. Soviet soldiers recognized SS insignia, separated those men, and uncovered mass graves that demanded vengeance. Execution was only the beginning. Those who survived faced brutal interrogations and labor camps designed to destroy them for their ideology. But the real fate of these prisoners is more disturbing and less known than most imagine. The Schutzstaffel, or SS, stood at the core of Nazi violence on the Eastern Front. Unlike regular army units, the SS operated as the regime's ideological enforcers, orchestrating mass shootings, anti-partisan sweeps, and the management of concentration camps. Soviet troops, advancing westward in 1944 and 1945, uncovered the aftermath of these operations firsthand. In village after village, Red Army soldiers found mass graves, sometimes hundreds of bodies at a time, evidence meticulously documented in SAMO files. These were not isolated incidents. Soviet investigators catalogued entire regions scarred by executions, scorched earth tactics, and the systematic murder of civilians. The SS left behind more than just physical devastation. Their actions were guided by a racial doctrine that targeted Jews, Slavs, and anyone labeled an enemy of the Reich. Historian Timothy Snyder describes the SS as a separate class of prisoner in Soviet eyes, responsible for policies that turned vast stretches of Eastern Europe into killing fields. For Soviet commanders, the evidence was undeniable. The liberation of camps like Auschwitz revealed industrial-scale murder, and villages in Ukraine and Belarus bore silent witness to mass reprisals. By 1945, the Red Army had liberated territory filled with the ruins of SS operations. This shaped Soviet policy at every level. The SS were not just another enemy to defeat, they were seen as the architects of genocide. For the Soviets, the question was not whether to punish, but how far to go. This perception set the stage for the special treatment SS prisoners would receive, separating them from the rest of the German military. Surrender on the Eastern Front was chaos in motion. As Soviet lines closed around them, SS units split. Some squads clung to their positions, firing until their ammunition ran dry. Others slipped away in the confusion, stripping off SS runes and collar tabs, hoping a borrowed Wehrmacht jacket might save them. Blood group tattoos, burned or cut, sometimes betrayed their efforts. Desperate men joined columns of regular soldiers, blending into the mass of prisoners trudging west, their eyes fixed on the hope of reaching American lines instead of Soviet captivity. Red Army patrols swept through the crowds, searching for the smallest sign, an accent, a missing patch, or a scar in the wrong place. Civilians and captured Germans pointed out suspects. Soviet officers compared names to lists, checked for telltale tattoos, and asked questions only an SS man would answer wrong. At makeshift collection points, prisoners lined up for inspection. Those identified as SS were pulled aside, sometimes at gunpoint. The separation was immediate and public. Executions happened on the spot in some places, especially where partisans or villagers had just revealed mass graves. But these shootings were not a blanket order. Many SS were simply marched away under heavy guard, routed toward holding pens, their fate undecided. Soviet records and Arolsen POW cards show the process was relentless, but not uniform. For every man shot in the field, dozens faced a more uncertain journey, marked, registered, and handed off to the next layer of Soviet security. The front was only the beginning. Inside the walls of NKVD holding cells, the ordeal for captured SS men began in earnest. Interrogators worked in shifts, their methods honed by years of war and suspicion. Sleep became a rare privilege. Prisoners were kept awake for days at a time, some for as long as 3 weeks, according to GARF interrogation logs. The lights never dimmed. Guards barked questions at all hours, demanding names, unit details, and confessions to crimes that ranged from partisan shootings to the operation of extermination camps. Physical beatings were routine. A slap could escalate to a fist, a boot, or the butt of a rifle. Some prisoners described being forced to stand for hours, knees locked, while the threat of execution hung in the air. The smallest sign of defiance, a wrong answer, or a refusal to sign, brought harsher treatment. Officers and camp guards drew special attention. Their files grew thick with forced statements, some extracted through days of relentless pressure. The goal was twofold: extract actionable intelligence about hidden networks or collaborators, and manufacture confessions for later use in public trials. SMERSH officers, infamous for their efficiency, kept detailed records of each session. One case file from Berlin in April 1945 tracks the breakdown of an SS Obersturmführer over 21 sleepless nights. By the end, his confession ran dozens of pages, covering everything from unit movements to lists of supposed accomplices. Many prisoners signed whatever was put in front of them, hoping for an end to the torment. Others broke in silence, giving up names that would fill the dockets of Soviet tribunals. In these cells, the line between fact and fiction blurred, but the machinery of retribution ground forward, one confession at a time. In the months after the fighting ended, the Soviets staged a series of public military tribunals for captured SS men. Courtrooms in cities like Riga and Leningrad filled with rows of uniformed judges, Soviet officers, and translators. The press packed the galleries, notebooks open, as the accused stood behind wooden barriers. Defendants ranged from SS generals to concentration camp guards, each identified by name and rank, their charges read aloud for the record. Trial transcripts reveal a spectrum of sentences. High-ranking officers and those linked to atrocities often faced the death penalty. In the 1946 Riga trial of 15 Majdanek guards, 8 were sentenced to execution, while the others received between 10 and 25 years of hard labor. Soviet newspapers like Pravda ran front-page stories, describing the proceedings as justice for the Nazi beasts who had brought mass suffering to Eastern Europe. Forced confessions, extracted during NKVD interrogations, were read in full. Details of mass shootings and camp operations echoed through the courtroom, leaving little doubt about the outcome. Lower-ranking SS soldiers rarely escaped harsh judgment. Most were labelled irreformable fascists, a designation that stripped them of any hope for early release. The sentences handed down by Soviet tribunals were not just about punishment, they were about spectacle and deterrence. Unlike Wehrmacht prisoners, many of whom saw leniency or repatriation within a decade, SS men faced a future defined by exile, forced labor, or the gallows. The verdicts delivered in these rooms set the course for what would follow, a journey eastward, beyond the reach of family or the outside world. Inside the camps, survival became a matter of numbers and luck. SS prisoners received starvation-level rations, sometimes as little as 1,200 calories a day, barely enough to keep a grown man alive while performing forced labor. Winter temperatures in Siberian camps dropped below -40 degrees, and thin uniforms offered little protection. Work details sent men into the forests to cut timber, or down into the mines, where exhaustion and frostbite claimed dozens each week. Disease spread quickly in overcrowded barracks, with typhus and dysentery unchecked. Camp registers from Vorkuta and Kolyma show that between 1945 and 1948, nearly half of all SS prisoners perished. Official figures from memorial archives estimate a 45% death rate among this group, far higher than for regular German prisoners of war. For most, the Gulag was not a temporary sentence. It was a slow, grinding end, recorded in fading columns of names and numbers. Between 1955 and 1960, West German families waited for news that rarely came. Most former Wehrmacht prisoners returned in those years, stepping off trains to reunions and relief. For the families of SS men, the silence was nearly total. Soviet authorities excluded most from repatriation, labeling them irreformable fascists. Tracing requests flooded the Aralson archives, with mothers and wives searching for any trace, a camp record, a transport list, even a death certificate. Diplomatic cables from Bonn pressed Moscow for answers, but Soviet responses arrived curt or not at all. Of the tens of thousands captured, only a handful of SS prisoners returned, often years after the rest, their health broken and their stories guarded. Many more simply vanished behind barbed wire, their fate left to speculation, their families left with nothing but unanswered questions. Even now, over 15,000 SS prisoners remain unaccounted for. Their fate is a reminder. When justice becomes vengeance, truth blurs and wounds endure. The legacy of these choices echoes in every debate over accountability and human rights today. What lines will we cross in the name of justice?